Hello legends and super legends, welcome to Veloharmony. I got a request this evening from Kyle Burr, and I went ahead and moved it up the queue even though he's not a super legend yet. And I decided to do this because I had announced that I would be converting all the displays to kilometers an hour. His request was, can you show us how to read kilometers? So I replied online in the comments section, gave him the formulas, but decided to make this video to show you guys a shortcut, easy way of converting kilometers per hour to miles per hour. For those of you who are in the US and that use the imperial system where we're more familiar with miles per hour, I'm going to be doing everything in the metric system because it's more universal for the whole world. So that's why when Carl asked, I said, you know, since I made the announcement I'm going to convert, I need to squeeze this video in and get it done. So I want to welcome our newest super legends. Arjun's one of them, and Jose Santiago. We appreciate you signing up on Patreon. Those of you who have not signed up on Patreon, check out the perks. There are rewards for being a VIP on this channel that you get. You know, you get like free fit assessments, and you get discounts on our services and other things. So go to patreon.com/Veloharmony or look on the channel page here on YouTube. Click on the Patreon button and check out the different reward levels and pick one. Arjun and Jose signed up for our, what we call our Lion Pride Patreon group, and they're getting free fits and they're getting 1 month of training plans that we'll work on later. You know, it's going to be customized for them. Once they give me the information I need, we'll set up plans. But I just wanted to welcome them, thank them for signing up. That keeps the channel going. What I want to talk about today is how you easily convert when you see a kilometer per hour, because most of us in the US, we don't use kilometers per hour. In my car, they have, and I think most cars here have them. They have miles per hour in larger numbers, then they got kilometers per hour in the smaller numbers. I'm sure the European cars is probably the opposite, or they probably don't even have miles per hour in there. But that's one way you can get familiar with it. But the easiest way to do it is what I'm going to show you here today, to where you can just see the numbers. As for those of you who saw the movie The Matrix, where, you know, the character Neo at the end after he's shot and he gets up and realizes that this is a world where I can control what happens to me because he was the one. I want to get you guys to see the numbers and not think about calculating the numbers. That's what this is about. So just bear with me. So the formula says that a kilometer an hour is 0.62 of a mile an hour. So let's say we drop the 2 and we say a kilometer an hour is 60% of a mile per hour. So for example, 5 kilometers an hour times 0.62 is about 3 miles. It might be 3 point something, whatever. We're not getting into that. You just want to be close, because when you're looking at it, 40 kilometers an hour is about 25 miles an hour, which is actually 24.8 rounded up. It doesn't need to be super precise for our purposes as athletes, but I think it's better for all of us to work in kilometers per hour because this sport is inherently European and that's what they use. So we might as well get on board with the rest of the planet. Those of you in North America, US area, because the guys in the UK and Australia, that's not an issue. So let me show you the cheat sheet. I did 5 kilometers an hour. I used the formula 3 miles an hour. How did I get there? I didn't use a calculator here, because if you actually use a calculator, I think it's 3 point something. So what I did was I said, okay, let's forget about this 2, and it's 60% of 5 kilometers will give me the value that equates to miles. So if you see 5 kilometers an hour, 60% of 5, not many people walking around instinctively know what 60% is. Kind of like when you're paying the tab at a restaurant. I mean, who knows what 15% is? So what I do at the restaurant, I know what 10% is. 10% is whatever number you see by moving the decimal point. So I use the 10% and then I take another 5% of it to figure it out. But anyway, let me come back here to where I will show you guys how to see the numbers. So you think about 5 kilometers, 60% of 5 Well, you may not know that intrinsically, but what you do know is 50% of 5. The average person knows 50% of a number. So to use that, you say, okay, 50% of 5 is 2.5. I know that. Now you got another 10% left. What is 10% of 5? It's the number itself, because you're just moving the decimal point. So you say, oh, 2.5 is half of that, and that other half, which is the 5. So basically, 50% of 5 is 2.5 miles an hour, and the remaining 10% of 5 is a half mile an hour. Because all you're doing is moving the decimal place back behind the 5. Because there's an invisible decimal place in front of every integer. It gets easier as the numbers get bigger. You'll see what I'm talking about. So you say, okay, 50% of 5 is 2.5. The other 10% that will make it 60, which is 0.5 mile an hour. So that gives me my 3. So let's come to the 10 kilometer. That's why I drew these on the board. 10 kilometers an hour. Even though this formula makes it easy to where you can see it and double it, I don't want to get to that point yet. I want you to see the numbers and feel the formula come to you. You know that you're looking for 60% of this number to give you the equivalent in miles per hour. So if you're watching the screen and you're watching us ride and you see, oh, we're doing 10 kilometers an hour, you're going to say, okay, 50% of 10 is 5 miles an hour. I got that piece, but I need the other 10%. What is 10% of this? It's 1, because you move the decimal place back 1 place. So 10% of the number is always the number itself for the most part. So you've got 10 kilometers an hour. Half of that is 5 kilometers an hour. 10% of 10 is 1. So that 5 you got for the 50% and the 1 you got for the 10% gave you 6 miles an hour. So every time you see a kilometer an hour, you want to get 60% of that. So the easiest way to get 60% of any number is start with half of it, which is 50%. Once you get that half of it, then you take the other 10% to get the number. So let's try it down here. 20 kilometers an hour. 50% of that is 10. So that's 10 miles an hour. But we need another 10%. 10% is the 2. That's how come this is 12. Let's try 30 kilometers an hour. So you're riding at 30 kilometers an hour and you want to know what it equates to in miles per hour. You take 50% of that 30, which gives you most of the conversion factor you're looking for. 50% of 30 is 15. What is 10% of 30? It's the number itself, 3. 15 plus 3 is 18. That's 18 miles an hour. And you can go and so on. So if you were doing 40 kilometers an hour, you would say, what is 40 kilometers an hour in miles per hour? Okay, half of 40 is 20, right? 40. And 10% of 40 is 4, 24. So it's actually 24.8 because I dropped the 2. So you see how close you can get, because all you need to know is, oh, that's about 24 miles an hour. That's about that. So once you get to where I'm using the main numbers that we ride at, we ride around, 18 miles an hour, 16 miles an hour. So now I'm going to show you an easy way. As you see in the formula here, the fact that 10 kilometers is equals to 6 miles an hour, 5 kilometers equals to 3. Now I'm going 5, 10. I didn't put 15. I went to 20. So 20 kilometers was 12. From here, from 10 kilometers to 20 kilometers, it went from 6 miles an hour to 12 miles an hour. It doubled. So if you were to try to say, oh, what's 15 kilometers an hour? That's in between. You can see now it's 3, because 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18. So what you want to see is that if you're going from 5 kilometers an hour, which is a good measure, I mean, you're not going to be doing 3 miles an hour on the bike, but I want you to see that 5 kilometers an hour equates to 3 miles an hour. That's never going to change. 10 kilometers an hour equates to 6 miles an hour. So it's going up in 3s. So for every 5 kilometers an hour, the miles per hour equivalent is 3. Ballpark. So that means every time you go up 5K is 3 miles. So when you go do a run on the weekend and they say we're doing a 5K, you're running 3 miles. If you're doing a 10K from 5 to 10, you're running 6 miles. Just generally, if you did the formula, it might be 6 point something or whatever. What I want you to see is every 5 kilometers an hour roughly equates to 3 miles an hour. So as you begin to watch, even if you're watching the European races or you start watching my videos that I'm going to display everything in the metric system, all you want to know for a fact are 2 things. 5 kilometers an hour is 3 miles an hour. And every time it goes up by 5 kilometers an hour, that equates to 3 miles an hour. Now, it doesn't mean the speed will be going up in those units. But what you want to look at is the fact that, okay, I know that every time I see the kilometer equivalent, I need to take that number, take half of it, and then add 10% of the number. That will give me my miles per hour. But another caveat, as you begin to see these numbers, you're going to see, say, 5 kilometer, 10 kilometer, let's say you see 12. If I'm doing 12 kilometers an hour, which is a pretty slow speed, I mean, we never ride at those speeds. But for example, let's say I'm doing 18 kilometers an hour. And you're like, 18 kilometers an hour, what's half of that? 9. What's 10% of 18? 1.8, almost 2. Oh, he's doing about 11 miles an hour. You see that? 9 plus 2. That's what I want you to see when I started doing the relationship with the matrix. Look at the number, take half of it, then take 10%, add them together. That gives you that 60% of the kilometers an hour to give you the number. So instead of you sitting there with a calculator, which nobody sits around watching a video or something with a calculator, you want to say, oh, whatever the kilometer an hour value is, I take half of it and then add 10% of that same kilometer an hour value. So if somebody says I'm doing 52 kilometers an hour, what's half of 52? 26. So you got 26 miles an hour in the bank. Then you say, what's 10% of 52? That's about 5. That's 31 miles an hour. You just need to be generally in the area. And then you begin to realize that, if I'm in the 50s with kilometers, I'm in the 30s with miles. That gives you that 60% range. And that's what you're seeing here. So if every time I go 5 kilometers an hour is 3 miles, all I need to know is that when I'm doing 15 kilometers an hour, I've gone 9 miles, because you can take 15 and say half of 15 is what? 7.5 thereabouts. And then what is 10% of 15 is 1.5. 7.5 plus 5 is 8 plus that 1 is 9. 9 miles an hour. So all you want to do is use that cheat sheet that says the easiest way to get 60% of the kilometer value. Eventually, you will begin to see these relationships that are laid out here a lot easier as you see the numbers, because you will know that every time I see, say, like when I'm riding my bike, when I see 26 kilometers an hour, I know I'm doing 16. How do I know that? Because 26, half of that is 13. And then you got that 2.6 from the 10%. If you add it there, you just round it up. That's 16 miles an hour. You add another 3 to the 13 that you got from the 26. So the formula, the remembering how to get to that 60% real quickly by splitting it and then just adding 10% of the value is the easiest way to remember the numbers. And what ends up happening is, that's why my display on my bike is in kilometers an hour. After a short while, very short, believe it or not, you get to know that when I'm doing 24, 25 kilometers an hour, I'm doing about 15. 25 in half is 12. 25, 10% is 2.5. 12 and 2.5 is 14.5. You're close enough, 14, 15 miles an hour. You get to know that. So then you get to know that every time I see 25, I know I'm doing about 15 miles per hour. When I'm riding my bike, I usually ride around anywhere from 26 kilometers an hour, which is like 16, 17, to about 32. Most of my rides, that's the range I'm in. 32 kilometers an hour is about 20. Again, it's 32, split it in half for that 50%, that's 16. Then 3.2 from the 10%, 16 plus 3.2 is 19 point something. I just rounded up, I know it's 20. 32 is about 20. And when you look in your car, it's the same thing. When the needle goes above 32 miles an hour, it lines up with the 20 on the kilometer reading in your car. So all those familiarizations, tips that I'm pointing out is how you get to know easily how to convert. Because all you want to know is, what does this mean when it says 35 kilometers an hour? And you quickly want to take the 35 and split it in half. 35 split in half is about 17 and a half. 50% of that is 17 and a half. And then you got 3.5 left with that 10%. Well, what is 17 and a half plus 3.5? That's about what, 21, 22, 17.5, 18, 21. So 35 is 21 miles an hour. You know, and a lot of times, sometimes when I'm sitting at my computer, I will do the calculation. That was a long time ago before I was very familiar with it. But after a few months of just working with kilometers an hour, you get to know 40 kilometers is 25, 30 is 20. So then you begin to see that as I go up in tens, the miles an hour is going up in fives, generally. Because what I went through here is we were going up in fives and miles per hour was going up in threes. So for every 5 kilometers, you get 3 miles an hour. So once you know what 10 kilometer is, or what, most of the time you're riding around between 20 to 30 kilometers an hour. So you know that 20 kilometers an hour is 12. So when you go to 25, you know it's 15. You'll get to just know that. I mean, I hope this transfers, because for me, I can see this really good because I've always been good with numbers. And so I took this approach and I used different examples so that those people who are not super comfortable with numbers will be able to see that, okay, I see what he means. Everybody knows what half of something is. So that's your fallback. Anytime you don't want to grab a calculator and you see kilometers an hour, you take half of that number that you see, because that's your 50%, and then take 10%. 10% is always moving that decimal place. So if you see 2 digits, 50 becomes 5 when it's 10%. If it's 10, it's just the first number. Because all you're doing is moving the decimal place back 1 place to the left. That's it for the 10%. That's how I split it to make it easy, because everybody is familiar with half, and then most people are familiar with 10%. I mean, 10% of $100 is $10. Everybody knows that because you move the decimal place. That's how you calculate it on the fly. So when you're watching the screen and you see 52 kilometers an hour, you're like, half of that sucker. Okay, half of 52 is 26. And then 5.2, 26 plus 5, 31. They're in the 30s. That's how you know. You hear 47 kilometers an hour, whatever. Somebody's doing 47 kilometers an hour. Well, 47 half is what? 23 point something, thereabouts. You just want to average. So you say, okay, it's 23, and then 4.7, you can even round to 5 and say, oh, they're almost 27, 28 miles an hour. They're under 30. You just want to generally know what range you're in your miles per hour that we're more comfortable with in the U.S. You know, that's the imperial form of measurement, because that will help you relate to what you grew up with here in the U.S. That's the best way I can show you how to convert from kilometers to miles per hour without breaking out a calculator all the time. It's not that complicated. The relationships are very clear. So if it's going up by 5, it's equivalently going up by 3s. So if you're doing 25 and you know it's 15 miles an hour, when you go to 30, you know it's gone up by 3 for the miles per hour. So you'll get to eventually know what 5, 10, 15, 20, the 5 kilometers, what they mean in the equivalent miles per hour. You get to know that just by doing this conversion we talked about. So I hope this will be enough to help you guys get more comfortable with knowing when you see the display for kilometers an hour and just on the fly being able to do that. So just think it through, and that's the best way I could try to explain it. So I hope this will help you and the rest of you guys that are going to be seeing stuff over here. I think it's kind of cool for us to do everything in a metric system, because It's just more universal for the world. I don't know why the U.S. had to do something their own way. You know, we should just do. It's just a more finite form of measurement. The kilometer is a smaller unit, so that means it's closer to precision than the mile. You know, so that's the thing. You know, so some of those things like on my display, maybe I should do something about meters. The meters are really easy. I think a meter is about 3 feet or something like that. So you just take the meters number and triple it. Multiply by 3, that will give you feet. I believe that's what it is. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy everything that's coming up. I just want to throw this out there. Cal requested it, and it just made sense since I decided to just go 100% metric, because I had been splitting hairs in my videos where I would show mile per hour, then show the meters and different things in the other display units. So now I just went all metric. And so that's going to be, and I think that's why he asked. They want to be able to know what does 30 kilometer an hour mean? What does 20 mean? So that's why I did this, okay? So no matter what, get out there, get your miles in. Tomorrow's Sunday, and I'm going to be riding again.